Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is, when is identity an impediment to growth? We can get very attached to our positions. And as we campaign, so to speak, for our positions, they get to define us in a certain way. And what happens when we're trying to evolve beyond the limits of that position? So in that respect, identity can when we interact with identity as a fixed commodity, it can serve to actually limit us and limit our expression and our potentials. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together and feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everyone else who's joining us. And today we're talking about identity and how it can actually be an impediment to our growth when we identify very heavily with our position, like when our beliefs become our identity, when we crusade for our beliefs. And it's interesting because it's important to be willing to stand for what we believe in, for sure. And the thing is that reality is quite changeable, and our personal realities are quite changeable and or mutable, shall we say. Also, we had a conversation about this yesterday, and this is something, that might be a contentious statement. Some people might perceive that as a contentious statement, but I can tell you that in the thousands of sessions that I have done with clients, seeing the radical and rapid transformation from one context, one perspective, one box to another, so to speak, one experience to another in such a short period of time, I can confidently say that our experience of reality is extremely mutable. And as a result of that awareness, it also occurs to me that this notion of identity is also quite mutable, and our beliefs about things and our feelings about things, our perspective on things is quite mutable. And as a result, when we think about creating a persona that is oriented around a very specific set of beliefs or positions, that persona can become something of a limiter on our ability to change. People, and this is, it's an interesting phenomena because people expect consistency. Human beings, I don't think we're very consistent, actually. You know, that we change over time. That's part of growth. That's part of life. You wouldn't recognize a 50-year oak tree as an acorn. You know, it's like, how do these two things relate? They look completely different, and so we too change throughout our lives, and we change our positions on things. We change our experiences of things for the most part, right? If we're engaged in life, hopefully we're evolving, right? And this conversation is coming up from a conversation that I had recently with someone who has created a pretty public platform for themselves around an issue that they have felt very passionately about. And that passion is from a place of having paid a personal price for whatever this platform evolved from. I'm being deliberately obtuse here. Anyway, what's interesting is in our conversation, I got to ask the question, if you become so identified with that platform that if your feelings about it shift, if you heal from this, is this going to be an impediment for you? Is the identity that you have developed going to be an impediment to your healing? In other words, are you so attached to that platform that platform is going to hold you in a fixed position rather than you holding it? Is it going to hold you? And I think that this is something that we are confronted with in life in so many ways, where we hold a belief and a perspective, and then what happens is it ends up holding us. It's not unlike the survival strategies that we cultivate for instance, as children, in perhaps in a threatened environment. A child learns a certain behavior or a certain survival strategy, which may be to be quiet, or it may be to be funny, or it may be to be self-deprecating, or any number of other things. And then that survival strategy is something that they carry through life, and it then in different contexts as an adult, what worked as a child becomes an impediment as an adult. And what happens is that initially we adopted that behavior to preserve our well-being, and ultimately it is holding us and it is impeding our well-being rather than supporting it. And this is, I think, very much the case with identity. So I know we've had this conversation before, but for instance, um, when we look at, when we identify as a victim, or we identify even some of our positive identifications, right? Like, I'm a fighter. That might be a positive identification because it allowed us, it was a survival strategy, right? We were in situations where it was a struggle and it was a fight, and we rose to that challenge, and now I'm a fighter. And the thing about being a fighter, it's not the same as having the ability to fight. Being a fighter, having that identity, requires that there be something to fight about, right? It requires that we find a fight, just by definition. It's very different from being able, having the capability when necessary to fight, right? Being a survivor, you know, there's something super powerful initially about owning that I went through that struggle, I survived. And then to be a survivor as an identity means that we're continuing to be surviving. Like we're maybe in survival, or we're in that struggle to survive. It's different from having the will and the strength and the courage to survive. Good morning, Dido. Welcome. So great to have you with us. So what we're talking about here is becoming an identity of behaviors, for example, or of a belief, and identifying with that as who we are. You know, people will say, well, that's who I am. And like it's a fixed commodity. But whatever it is we say we are that and so much more. And by recognizing that distinction between a behavior and our beingness, our identity, is really, really powerful and can be profoundly freeing, because I don't have to be a fighter. I can know how to fight. I can bring it if I need to, and I don't have to be a fighter. And that way I don't have to be looking for a fight all the time. So I'm not saying this as just like Joe on the street. I was a fighter. I was a fighter. I was angry. Like, who I was angry. Like, that was my first response to pretty much anything, was anger, because That was a good offense is the best defense. So being that, I would have to find all kinds of things to be angry about all the time. And that's consuming. Anger is consuming. And really it hurts us more than it hurts anybody or anything that we're angry at, right? So does it mean I can muster anger if I need to? Oh yeah, I can if I need to. But it's not my knee-jerk reaction anymore. It doesn't have me, I have it. So the same is true with our beliefs. We tend to think like the beliefs are like this power, this truth. You know, we interact with our beliefs like we know this is a fact, this is the truth. And while it may be our current truth with a lowercase t, it's not the ultimate truth, immutable forever and always with a capital T. And I'm saying that because if we can hold life, hold our beliefs, hold our identity or identities with open hand, then they become a tool for us. When otherwise, when we be them, they become a box in which we are confined and they limit us. And they can end up being very oppressive. So I guess we're talking about dogma, right? When we have this emphatic commitment to this is how it is, and being right and being righteous in that rightness. And when we have that level of righteousness, what happens if something changes? What happens if we no longer feel that way? What happens if we no longer are living from a place of being wronged or being victimized? Actually, I've talked about this before with the distinction between being a victim, and having been victimized. Okay. So having had an experience where one was victimized does not mean that we must then become victims. It does not mean that we need to adopt a state of being that is victim. It doesn't mean that the behavior, that the perpetration or you know that we experienced was right. It doesn't diminish the wrongness of that happening, that event. It just allows us a freedom to be something more than a reaction to our experience. When we talk about sovereignty, and we talk about it a lot, what we're talking about is the freedom to choose and create our being state. And we often don't even know that we have that choice. But I'm here to say, yeah, guess what? We've got a choice about how we be. That's the one thing that can't be taken away from us. It's the one expression of our greater will that resides within us, that we can hold as untouchable, where we get to cultivate our way of being. And I'm not saying that it's easy either, because so many of us have extreme challenges in life. And it takes courage and commitment to be willing to entertain a different way of thinking about our experience, a different way of feeling about our experience. I was hearing an interview on NPR, I think it was yesterday, the day before, and they were talking about people who were unjustly imprisoned, people who were wrongly condemned, even condemned to death. And there was one person who, after decades in prison, was finally exonerated and freed. And this person had known, of course, that this case against them was manufactured, that the motivations of the people behind it were not pure, that there was money involved, and it ended up with them being in jail for decades. And this person who had been in jail, imprisoned unjustly, had cultivated some compassion and understanding for the motivation of the person that ended up putting them there. And they did this as much for them, more for themselves than for the other person, because they chose not to be consumed by the anger and the rage and the injustice. It was an unjust situation all the way around, indisputably. And that person who was unjustifiably jailed could have felt, it could have been being a victim, and they chose not to. They chose not to, for their own welfare, for their own well-being. They chose not to identify with that injustice. They chose an identity that provided them with freedom, even though they were incarcerated. And so that choice took commitment and courage, because certainly they had every reason to have a story of victimization, right? So if we can learn to hold our identity with open hand, our beliefs with open hand, our interpretations, to know that we are mutable, that our perspectives are mutable, then we can allow for that mutability, and we can allow for the growth and transformation that comes from that, without creating some kind of cognitive dissonance that just makes us crazy. You know, I can allow myself not to be angry. I can allow myself not to be a fighter. And like I said, can I muster anger if it's called for? Can I fight if it's called for? Yes. But it's not holding me. And what I hope we want is for ourselves to have a path to move toward freedom in our lives. And that means, in so many cases, letting go of who we've believed ourselves to be, letting go of all these identities that have been cast upon us that we've sort of caught and fielded and run down the field with of our lives. So I guess instead of this grasping, holding kind of thing that we have about our beliefs and our ideas and our positions, if we can just sort of hold with open hand, there's much greater possibility and potential for our truest evolution and expression. And with that, that's it for today. So I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it's such a deep pleasure and privilege to be able to be with you and share these musings on what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.